watched Britain's most famous PT's documentary on ultra-processed foods this week, and you're wondering whether or not you need to bin all of your snacks and stop buying protein bars, then this episode is for you, my friends. So I spoke to Dr. Richie Kirwan today about Joe Wicks's killer protein bar and his documentary Joe Wicks, License to Kill. Richie is going to help us all understand ultra-processed foods, whilst we take a look at some of the big scary claims made in the documentary. We also touch on some of the important stuff that was missed out when talking about health and nutrition, such as food inequality. Before we get to that, here's a bit of background if you haven't watched the documentary and you're not following fitness drums. Joe recently ran this campaign where he created a protein bar called Killer with the most additives that he possibly could based on legal limits, where he said this multiple times, they said it in the documentary multiple times, they specifically wanted to make someone shit their pants when they ate a whole one of these protein bar. So he made it, called it Killer, gave it to influencers, sold it on his website. I assume it's going to end up in stores at some point as well. And he wanted the campaign to be a warning for people about the dangers of ultra-processed foods. But does he achieve these goals? What even is an ultra-processed food anyway? Look, here's my chat with Richie. I hope you enjoy. Richie, hi. Thanks so much for joining me. How you doing?
Good. Hiya, Penny. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming. So, right off the bat, what are your first thoughts on the documentary before we get kind of deeper into the nitty-gritty of it? And also, first thoughts on like how everything has followed afterwards.
Right. So the documentary was as I expected, because I knew it was coming, and I had a bit of an idea of what way it was going to go. And it didn't disappoint in that sense, but it very, very much disappointed in what it should have been. So I'll say first, and I want to kind of get this clear. Joe Wicks, I really kind of rated like some of the stuff that he did in the past in terms of like making exercise more accessible to people, or making it a bit more normalized for people, which I think is a good thing. And like, you know, he did a lot of videos like cooking at home from scratch, which I think is a great thing and more people should be doing. This documentary could have been something really, really valuable. Could have been like an educational experience for people. But instead, it missed a major opportunity, and it just became what I expected it to become, which was a lot of fear mongering around ingredients lists, which is something I'm seeing more and more and more on social media these days. You know, like you'll know them yourself. These guys who walking around supermarkets, ripping stuff off shelves, looking at the ingredients list and saying, this is going to kill you, and this will give you cancer, or this will give you a stroke. And that's pretty much what the documentary was for a lot of things, without any nuance at all about the whole situation with ultra processed foods. And there's a lot of nuance to it.
Yeah, hopefully we can get into some of that nuance today. I was actually having a conversation with someone in the gym today who's like been trying to gain some weight for ages, but it's really, really difficult. And then she mentioned, because I was telling her about doing the podcast today and I was telling her about the documentary, and she was like, oh yeah, but I avoid things that have too many ingredients in them too. And I was just thinking, everyone I know who like trains really hard but can't gain weight are all people who try and avoid foods that have too many ingredients in them. And I think that pursuit for like avoiding processed things is really limiting a lot of people who do a lot of exercise from getting enough calories to achieve those performance goals. And that is a shame, because those are the people I think that are absorbing a lot of this information about what health is.
Oh, absolutely. Like you've absolutely nailed it right there. I'm going to say straight off the bat that let's say people with athletic goals, people who are like, you know, into gaining weight for a sport or something like that, they're going to be very, very different from the, you know, the average person who is, you know, in general, you know, trying to kind of avoid the gaining weight. Those people who need to gain weight, exactly as you said, many times it's because they're trying to eat, and I'm using this, I'm doing air quotes here for anybody. I'm saying they're trying to eat clean, and they're not able to put on the weight that they have. And I'm going to give a classic example of this. I did a workshop for a powerlifting gym 2 years ago, and for a lot of the guys, it was their first time like actually interacting with a nutritionist, but they'd heard loads of stuff about nutrition online, and I this was mostly a throwaway comment, but it was a serious comment. It was like, for a lot of people who are having difficulty gaining weight, I would say throw a tin of rice pudding into a blender with your protein shake, and that's a really, really easy way of getting a load of extra calories in. And obviously, a rice pudding in a tin is a processed food. You've got your sugar, your rice, your milk, whatever. Anyway, I this guy came up to me and he said, seriously, you could do that. And I said, yeah, you're an athlete. You're trying to gain weight. It's not happening at all. You're spinning your wheels. You need more calories. This is an easy way of getting some calories into you, and there's no issues with it. You're not going to gain a lot of weight. The guy has contacted me twice in the past year just to say, thanks so much for that advice. I finally started gaining weight. I've upped all of my totals. And I'm like, yeah, you just needed to eat more. Just make it easy for yourself.
I'm pleased that he listened to you, because a lot of the time in gym spaces, that's a really hard message to get to people, especially when people are doing like strength stuff and also endurance stuff. So then they're doing loads of stuff, and you need loads of calories to do loads of stuff.
Absolutely. Like I would consider myself a small guy, and I've gotten to points where I'm eating like 4,000 calories a day and not gaining weight because I'm just like, you're expending so much with gym work and stuff like that. But again, obviously that's not the general population.
Gosh, 4,000 calories a day. It must be nice to be a boy. What the heck?
It's hard. I'm going to be honest. Getting that many calories, it's not easy. Delicious though, delicious, very delicious.
So in the documentary at the beginning, they mention loads of like risks, big claims that I wanted to just throw at you and see if any of them are true. So the first one was that aspartame causes cancer. Is that true? What's that based on?
Okay, I think that's the classic one that everybody goes to, and everybody talks about aspartame. So, just for anybody who's not familiar, aspartame is quite possibly one of the most commonly used artificial sweeteners that we have. It's used in many diet drinks. So, normal diet Coke is aspartame sweetened, and aspartame is it's notorious for people saying, "Oh, it causes cancer," and if you look at what that's based on, it's based on studies that were done in mice. Okay, so first off, there's no human evidence whatsoever that it causes any harm. But there is studies done in mice. And if you look at the studies that are done in mice that show that it causes cancer, one, you show that they're giving the mice doses of aspartame that you simply wouldn't get from drinking a normal amount of Coca-Cola, like even drinking a relatively abnormal amount of Coca-Cola or Diet Coke, you wouldn't get it. But not only that, the mice that are used in the experiments are a strain of mice that are bred to develop tumors early. So they're getting more tumors. Anyway, this breed of mice that they will use, they'll get tumors, and you're giving them absolutely abnormal amounts of this chemical in a completely abnormal scenario. And they developed tumors. And so people are saying, right, okay, so this food causes cancer. The problem with that is one, the situation is completely abnormal. That's not what humans do. Two, it's a study done in animals, and animal research is important. I think animal research can be fantastic, but making connections between animal research and human health outcomes it's a very, very risky thing to do. Generally, in mice, we do not see the same things happening in humans, especially when it comes to nutritional context. We're different animals. And just for anybody who's a bit concerned about aspartame is basically two amino acids bound by, I think it's a methyl bond. And what happens is that when that gets broken down, we get that broken down into those two amino acids, which are what we get in our protein. And we get very, very tiny amounts of the additional chemical. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but we would get the same amounts of that chemical from eating pears. But nobody's talking about, holy crap, eating pears is going to give you cancer. People say, like, eat more pears. It's probably good for your health, reducing your risk of cancer. But if you can say this is linked with cancer, that's scary. And that's how television works. I'm going to be very, very, flat out honest. I have never seen a nutrition documentary that I have thought has been good. They have all been designed with one thing in mind, and that is to shock and awe people, because that's how you get people's attention. That's how you get people to watch it, because you have to give them a bit of a fright. You have to give them a scare. And yeah, that's what they were doing in this example.
I think I saw something about the Coca-Cola, an example of Coca-Cola, how much you would have to drink, and it was like, and I can't remember how many cans of Coke it was. It was something ridiculous, like 50 cans of Coke a day for a really long amount of days or something.
To potentially meet like the same levels that were used in those experiments, and then we don't even know, will it have that same effect in humans?
Because we're not
You know?
mice. Yeah.
Because we're not mice. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, I completely blanked. It was methanol that it forms. Okay. And methanol, which is a type of alcohol. Methanol, if you drank loads of it, it would kill you, but it's naturally present in loads of fruit. So yeah, it's just what really bothers me about that is that the other guy who was in the documentary, which is Dr. Chris Van Tullochen, everybody knows him. He's quite famous now because he wrote a book about processed foods. He did a TV series about processed foods. He's the processed foods guy. Chris Van Tullochen is an infectious disease expert. That's his job. He focuses on infectious diseases. He's done work on infectious diseases in other countries. That's not nutrition. And just because Chris is a doctor doesn't mean that he actually knows anything about nutrition. And that's something that the general population often kind of gets wrong. It's like, if you've got MD, in your title, people are like, wow, they're a doctor. They know everything about health. And I have friends who are doctors who actually do know about nutrition because they've done their master's degrees in nutrition or they've done PhDs in nutrition. And they will say that in a standard medicine course in the UK and most countries, the nutritional input in terms of like how many hours you get is minimal. You're talking maybe 1, 2 if you get anything in terms of education around nutrition. So doctors don't know. But what really bothered me is that he is a doctor. He should be more responsible, but he was making these very, very scary comments that were designed to shock and awe with no nuance whatsoever. And I was just kind of blown away. It's like, how can this man who is a professional and who is supposed to be, like educating the public, say something so blatantly irresponsible and so, yes, basically, why would he fearmonger like this? I didn't get it.
I think having a doctor, especially when you don't know what someone's a doctor of, just a doctor adds credibility to a lot of these claims. So then you're like, oh, well, the doctor is saying that I should be afraid, so then I should be afraid, because everybody listens to doctors. While we're talking about this doctor and his lack of nutrition qualifications, do you want to tell everyone what your nutrition qualifications are so they know that they should listen to you?
Oh no, I'm just a guy on the internet. A couple of people have like asked me that because I mentioned that about Joe's not having a nutrition qualification, and they said, yeah, so what nutrition qualifications do you have? And I was like, oh, right, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. So I've got a master's degree in nutrition metabolism. I've got a PhD in clinical nutrition. I work as a lecturer in nutrition and exercise physiology. I'm a senior lecturer at John Moores University here in Liverpool. And I'm a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition. So those are my qualifications. I've been working in the field of nutrition for 10 years. And prior to that, like my undergrad was in biological sciences. So like it's been science-based, for the undergrad, and then everything since then has been nutrition focused.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm hoping that means that you're going to be able to answer all my science questions as we go along.
Fingers crossed.
So one of the other claims from the beginning was that food coloring is made out of crushed bugs. I knew that used to be true, but is that still true?
So that specific food coloring, yes, but it is being used less and less. I'm not sure of the state of its use in the UK, but yeah, the one red food coloring is made from these particular bugs that I think they grow. Well, they traditionally grow on kind of prickly pear cacti, which is, yeah, like, look, I eat everything. I've got no major issues eating bugs, but I do kind of take issue with like using bugs to make a food dye, which is a bit, yeah. But then again, you can also say that food dye is very natural because it does come from an insect.
I guess. But kind of gross. I mean, I don't eat animals, so being snuck bugs into my food is a bit gross.
Well, see, if you weren't aware of it, now that's an issue. Like, you would need to know that that's in there. Absolutely.
He said ultra processed foods cause 14% premature deaths in England. Is that true? What's that based on? How would we know that?
So this is a really, really good point. Okay, so a lot of people think since I kind of made the statement that some people have assumed that I'm saying that ultra processed foods in general are absolutely fine, and that's not what I'm saying. So I actually give a lecture to my second year nutrition students on ultra processed foods, and one of the things that we talk about is the increased risk of a number of different conditions associated with an increased consumption of ultra processed foods, and it's very, very true. To kind of pull that apart, we need to explore why or what's going on here. And if you think about it, okay, so let's go back to the claim that nearly 60% of people in the UK first eat, 60% of the diet or the calories in the UK comes from ultra processed foods. That's very true. It's getting very, very close to 60%. So that means that 60% of all the calories in somebody's diet are coming from ultra processed foods, which means we're not getting a huge amount of foods that we would consider to be whole foods that are health promoting. So if somebody's getting a load of calories from ultra processed foods, they're not getting much nutrition, or like in terms of like protein, fiber, phytonutrients, which we get from plants, polyphenols, etc. They're not getting much of that from fruit, vegetables, whole grains like nuts, seeds, legumes, all of these things. So what that means is that people in general have an awful diet. And they said actually in lower socioeconomic groups, people have an even worse diet. They're about 80% of their calories are coming from ultra processed foods. So these people have awful diets. And when you have a load of ultra processed foods, you're probably getting a load of calories into your diet as well. So we've got this terrible situation where we've got this increased amount of easy calories, which are predominantly coming from, let's say, refined fats, sugars, refined carbohydrates, with very little nutritional value. So lots of calories, very little nutritional value. And this is going on for years and years. And we're getting people who are developing obesity more easily. They're developing metabolic syndrome, which is a kind of a combination of insulin resistance and a load of other conditions like high blood pressure, problems with blood lipids, increased waist circumference, and then all of the associated conditions that come with that. Cancer, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, chronic kidney disease. So yeah, we're in a bad situation from a health perspective. Now, I'm saying this, and it's like, yeah, this is what the guys were saying. The guys were, the guys in the documentary. The guys in the documentary were very, very much focused on ingredients in these foods. So, like you said, they were speaking about aspartame. They were speaking about the red food coloring coming from insects. They were speaking about like additives, preservatives, and how these are all having this negative effect. And what I'm saying is that it is very, very likely that it's not these additives in isolation that are causing the problem. It's the fact that the population as a whole has a. Can I swear?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's the problem is that the population as a whole has an absolutely shit diet. Like, people have awful diets, and we are not getting enough nutrients. We're getting far too many calories. If people were eating healthy diets and they ate a little bit of ultra processed food, despite the fact that it's got additives or sweeteners or preservatives or any of these things, people would still be absolutely healthy, because it's not these additives, it's not these ingredients that these guys focused on. The situation in general with ultra processed foods. That situation with ultra processed foods, the fact that some of us are getting 60% of calories, some of us are getting even more of our calories from ultra processed foods, that is a problem. It's a societal problem. It's not something that you're going to solve by telling people, oh, you better read your ingredients list, because if this is in it, it'll give you a stroke, or it'll give you cancer, or it'll cause early death, like the guys did in the documentary. That's something that needs to be sorted out. And why are people resorting to ultra processed foods? Why do people not have enough time to cook? Why do some families not even have enough cooking facilities to do this? Why are some families why is it in some families both parents are working ridiculous hours just to make ends meet for their kids to survive, and have to resort to ultra processed foods? Why are ultra processed foods absolutely everywhere in our environment, and why are they so cheap? That's the problem that was not even discussed at all. It was just like, these additives are here. The regulations allow these additives to go in here. And yeah, the regulations do allow those additives, because in normal amounts, they're absolutely fine. But it's in this ridiculous excess that we have of ultra processed foods. That's what the problem is. And that's what I think was the big missed opportunity with this. This is a problem. It's not to do with the individual ingredients. It's the fact that we've got a shit food system.
I'm really glad you brought, no, it's fine. I'm really glad you brought all of that up, because I feel like a lot of the time when, especially when like millionaires are telling everyone else to not eat specific things, like when a millionaire's like, stop eating processed foods and cook everything from scratch, it's like, who has time to be making 3 meals a day from scratch, or to be like making all of their snacks from scratch? Everyone has work to do. Some people don't even have cars, so they can't be driving to do big shops, so they have to do little shops. And if you're doing little shops, you can't be buying like all of these whole foods and nothing else, because it's just not feasible for a lot of people to live that way, in the way that our food environments are set up, and in the way that capitalism within the UK works. People are struggling to meet basic guidelines, and you're telling them that this swapping their chocolate bar for a protein bar is going to kill them, when maybe that's the best decision that someone can make in that moment to at least get some protein in their day.
Absolutely. So somebody made a comment on the video that I was on the reel that I released. It was today actually, and they said, and it was just very, very matter of fact, I don't eat any ultra processed food. I cook all of my meals from scratch, and I get all of my ingredients from local markets. Why can't I? Right? And my response to this was like, fantastic, well done for you. You are in an incredibly privileged position. And I consider myself to be very, very privileged, because I love cooking, right? For one, I love cooking. That's one privilege. The second privilege is I grew up in a household where, cooking, or with a grandmother who cooked a lot and involved me in cooking. So I learned how to cook. I'm very privileged in that I have a job that allows me some degree of flexibility to, give me some time every day to cook and to prepare healthy meals for myself. So the majority of the food I eat is let's say, unprocessed or whatever. And I do definitely eat ultra processed foods as well. But I'm able to do that. There are other people for whom that is absolutely not a reality. And I think it is just the height of ignorance to kind of say to people, you just need to cook for yourself more often, and you just need to go to the farmer's market and get the ingredients there instead of going to the supermarket. Well done, you. All well said and done. Like, who can actually do that? Some people can't do that at all. Sorry, I get very riled up about this.
That is fun. Be as riled as you need to be. I think it's important, and I think it's the thing that a lot of people miss when they're talking about nutrition. And I think that's why sometimes having like things happen at public health level where they change things for everyone can be really useful. Like when they start fortifying cereals with like vitamin D and stuff. Okay, now that's ultra processed. Now you're telling people that's terrible. But if there are vitamins in there that they're not getting in any other way, is that not better for all of us?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's an absolutely classic example. That's brilliant. So for example, like the fortification of foods, cereals with folate, okay, or folic acid, has reduced the risk of neural tube defects, which so I teach this in my lectures. Neural tube defects. But Penny, I don't know if you've ever seen like images of a child who has a neural. It's horrendous, and it can leave some children paralyzed if their mother does not get sufficient folate, during her pregnancy. And we can solve that problem very, very simply by putting this completely synthetic. Now, and I say it's a synthetic vitamin. It's a synthetic vitamin that is identical to the vitamin that you'll get in food sources, and it has the same function in the body. We solve a problem just by doing that and making food ultra processed. And the other thing with that is, well, and I'm going to go back to the example of breads, for example. Like most bread that you get in the supermarket is ultra processed, simple as that. But you can now go in, get bread that is made like a wholemeal bread, okay, that is very, very high in fiber, okay, that is good, providing fiber in a diet, and I'm talking about the UK diet, that is generally exceptionally low in fiber, and that now has a shelf life that is more than a day and a half. Because like when I was a kid, I remember like some of the stuff that we would get from the bakery, and you know, it would be in the cupboard for a day or two, and then it would have a lovely layer of green fuzz growing on it. That doesn't happen anymore. People can save money that way, and that's something that people need to do. They don't need to be going out buying fresh bread all the time because of ultra processed foods.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well with like vegetarians and vegans, like I don't eat any seafood. I'm not getting any iodine in any other way, but Oatly puts it in their oat milk. So if I'm just having oat milk with my cereal, putting oat milk in my coffee, I'm still getting a source of iodine that I wouldn't otherwise get without like having to eat seaweed, which I really don't want to do because it tastes like
It's
fish.
delicious. What's wrong?
And I think people really miss a lot of that when they're talking about additives, because they're like, no, additives, always bad, evil, terrible, going to make us sick, when a lot of the additives are being added to stop us from getting sick.
Well, I'll put it like this. The food supply right now is safer than it has ever been. The amount of incidences of like food poisoning, the amount of recalls for food has gone down because we are better able to produce safer food. And additives play a role in that. Here's the thing, like people think, you know, they're throwing these additives in like just, you know, willy-nilly. These things are tested. And they're tested. Obviously, they're tested to a certain level. Okay, so we can say that below a certain level, they're fine. You can also say then above that, then that's a concern. Well, the only way you're going to get above that is if you have a diet that is nothing but processed foods. But then you can say that if you're getting a diet that's nothing but processed foods, your diet is shit overall. Where are the vegetables? Where's the fruit? Where are the whole grains? Why are you eating so many calories? All of those are contributing to ill health. And then you've got this little bit of an additive on the side. It's like, oh yeah, it's the additive that's doing that. And I want to kind of just reiterate again, yes, we are eating far too many ultra processed foods. And like when I'm saying ultra processed foods, I'm referring to the ones that actually have negative health effects, because there are ultra processed foods that have benefits as well, like we've just mentioned. Like a protein powder, if somebody wants to use that, like I use a protein powder in my breakfast in the morning, just because I've tried putting in Greek yogurt into my porridge, and I don't know if you've ever tried that. It's not good. It's just not a good combination. I've tried cottage cheese, horrendous. You put some protein powder in there, it's got its emulsifiers, it's got its sweeteners, it's got its preservatives. It tastes delicious. It gives me all the protein that I need, and it allows me to eat my porridge, which is full of fiber, and then I put in all of my seeds and my fruit and whatever. It allows me to follow a healthier diet overall, but it's ultra processed.
I mean, full disclosure, I get loads of Optimum Nutrition stuff for free and have a discount code. So like a very tiny piece of skin in the game, I suppose. But like, I'll use Optimum Nutrition, like I'll use a protein powder every day with some creatine every day, because I'm a vegetarian and there's no way in hell I'm getting enough protein otherwise. It's just not feasible because I'm small and there's only so many meals I can eat a day. And if I want to get a serving of protein, that's like twice as much food a lot of the time in vegan sources compared to my girlfriend just eating a piece of chicken, which is a bit annoying. So like it's really useful. But okay, so do people need as much protein? Like gym people, we try and eat a lot of protein. We're trying to be strong, healthy people. We're eating a lot of protein. Do we need as much protein as we're told we do?
It depends on who's telling you what about the protein. But I'll say this, right? So protein is one of my kind of, you know, areas of research that I like. So I studied protein a lot for my PhD, which was about high protein diets in older adults. I would say that kind of actually, let's start with what the recommendation is. The recommendation at the moment for protein in the UK is 0.78 grams per kilogram of body weight. We'll say 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, which is very, very little. So for a 70 kilogram person like myself, a little bit heavier than that. So like myself, that's about 56 grams of protein. Okay. I know some guys, some athletes who eat 56 grams of protein in a meal. Okay. And we'll eat multiple meals a day. That amount of protein is there to help prevent something called protein malnutrition. And a classic example of that is a disease called kwashiorkor. And if you've ever seen, and you don't see these anymore, but like back in the day, you used to see a lot of advertisements for charity groups online that would show children in certain parts of the world that were suffering from famine. And you would see these incredibly skinny children that had these very, very large pot bellies. And that's a classic sign of kwashiorkor and this protein malnutrition. So those recommendations that we have are designed to prevent people from suffering from that condition. They're not designed for optimal health. And I would say from an optimal health perspective, the average person should probably be aiming for 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If somebody's an athlete and trying to build more muscle, this is where it gets a little bit sketchier, but we think that a good level is 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And there is some evidence going as high as 2.2, 2.4 grams per kilogram per day, that there could potentially be benefits for that in people who are training really, really hard and really trying to put on a lot of muscle. But for the average person, 1.2, if you're a gym rat, if you're getting 1.6, you're probably good. You know,
in the documentary and in his like marketing campaign, he like made this protein bar, and they're putting all of the things in. There's a bit in it where he's like putting the sweetener in, and he's like, put so much, I want people to like shit their pants when they eat this. So I guess question one is, how much sweetener would it take for someone to have diarrhea, I guess?
to shit their pants.
To shit their pants, yeah. And two, I just can't get over the fact that he made, okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I can't get over the fact that he made a bar that he intentionally made as bad as possible, that he seems to genuinely believe is going to kill people, and then he's actually selling it for real, because he's selling it to make a point, like, oh, look how bad this is, but it's still going to end up with people eating the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that blows my mind, because if you genuinely believe that this is something that's going to kill people, why are you actually selling it to them? Because most people, they're not going to read the disclaimer bit. They're going to see the 19 grams of protein, 200 health benefits, and they're just going to eat it.
Okay.
And that it just blows my mind.
There's a lot to unwrap with that. Okay, so first off, obviously the bar is a marketing stunt. Okay, and like it's going to have like a limited run, and all of the profits are going to charities that support healthy eating in the UK, which I think is fantastic. That was a really, really good idea with those bars. There were a lot of scenes in the documentary where he was kind of like, he was fraught, between minds about like, oh, is it the right thing to be creating this bar? Should I be, this could actually hurt people. No, it can't. So the bar was designed to be at the kind of maximum safe limit of everything that was in it. So if you eat the bar, nothing is going to happen. You're going to have a bar. Actually, so I looked at the nutritional profile of the bar, and he's done a really, really good job of it. He's like, it's what, about 200 calories, about 19 grams of protein, standard for a protein bar. It's got a load of fiber, and that'll come from some of the sweeteners that are in it, because a lot of sweeteners that are used these days, like chicory fiber, for example, are also fiber sources as well, which is beneficial in that context. He also claimed that the bar was high in saturated fat. Actually, the bar is just under the legal limit to be qualified as not being high in saturated fat. It's just on the edge, but it's under the limit. So the bar itself is absolutely fine, especially if you think of this. If you eat that bar in the context of a healthy diet, you could eat one of those bars every day and there's no problems whatsoever. Simple as that. In terms of the diarrhea claims and him wanting people to shit themselves eating it. So I've got a buddy who's a medical doctor, and he watched the documentary himself, and he said he couldn't get over how many times Chris Van Tulleken mentioned diarrhea. It seemed like he was obsessed with it throughout the whole thing. So that claim comes from maltitol. And maltitol is it's a polyol, which is a sugar alcohol, and they're something that we've got for years. They're naturally occurring. They occur in many fruit, and polyols, if you eat them in large amounts, yes, they cause digestive discomfort. So, for example, if you ate a load of them, you would have stomach pains. So, and that warning, anything that contains maltitol will have that warning that excessive consumption will have a laxative effect. Maltitol is very commonly used in sugar-free products, like especially diabetic products and diabetic sweets. So people who can't eat sugar because of diabetes can eat maltitol because it doesn't have an effect on blood sugar. That's fantastic. But if you eat too much, you'll have that effect. You will see packs of sugar-free Haribo. And there's actually a lot of videos on YouTube, if you go onto this, where people trick people and get them to eat an entire pack of sugar-free Haribo and then watch the effects. And it's pretty horrendous. Like it will tear your insides apart because it plays with the levels of liquid in your digestive system. It has an osmotic effect, and it's very, very uncomfortable. It can cause diarrhea in some people. I'm going to give you an example of this. I once ate an entire pint of sugar-free ice cream that was sweetened with maltitol, and I swear to God, my stomach was torn to pieces because it wasn't a pint. It was it 2 pints? It was a very large tub. It was possibly 2 pints. And I just sat down and ate the whole thing. Maybe I was having a moment, I don't know. And I ate the whole thing. And it was a horrendous experience, but it didn't kill me. Did you die though? I didn't. If you eat too much of something, too much of anything is bad. And like they did mention the word excess, which I thought was really, really important. They mentioned excess when they were talking about a lot of things. So I think one of the phrases or the catchphrases for the bar was that some of the ingredients in this, if eaten in excess, can cause, and they listed off cancer, and they listed off stroke and early death and diarrhea. Excess is an important word because excess literally means too much. If you eat too much of anything, it's bad for you. If you exercise too much, it's bad for you. If you eat too much fiber, surprise, surprise, you're going to get gastric pain, and you're also going to probably poop yourself badly as well. Fiber is fantastic for you. We know that fiber is one of the best things that we can get. But if you eat too much, it'll mess you up. And the same has to apply to this. But they didn't talk about that nuance at all. And that was a major failing of the whole thing. Yeah.
I think something that Joe seems to really struggle with from like just watching the documentary and seeing his videos when they pop up on social media is that he doesn't seem able to control his own like ability to not eat to excess. Like I saw that video a few weeks ago of him like relapsing on the Jaffa cakes, and then in the documentary at the beginning when they tasted the first batch, they were like, oh, it's like tasting the first batch of meth. And like conflating eating a snack with drug addiction seems wild and kind of reckless because like nobody is robbing their granny to buy a pack of Jaffa cakes. Nobody's like on the street homeless because they spent all their money on a bag of granulated sugar. It's not the same thing.
I do think Joe has a poor relationship with food potentially, and this is my big concern over this documentary, is that this poor relationship with food and this food fear is something that is going to kind of rub off onto people who watch the show, and they're like, oh my God, these ingredients are terrible, I need to avoid them. It's leading to a form of orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with eating what we consider to be healthy foods or clean foods or pure foods. And it is something I'm genuinely concerned because I see this again and again. And many of the comments that I've gotten on this, like the negative comments that I've gotten on, are from people who clearly have some form of orthorexia, who are saying, I would never eat that. We shouldn't touch UPFs. They shouldn't be anywhere in our diet. And it's like, you've been indoctrinated and now you're afraid of UPFs. And it's the same with these people who go around supermarkets. I call them supermarket scarers. It's their only job to go around and scare people about certain foods. It's like, and they're literally, those people who are doing it, they have a form of orthorexia, and they are promoting that orthorexia to people who are watching these videos. And what scares me then even more is that if parents, and I can understand this, parents are concerned about the health of their children, obviously, but parents will develop this orthorexia. They'll develop this unhealthy relationship with food, and they are going to pass that relationship on to their children. And the last thing the world needs is more people freaking out about food and fearing food and certain ingredients.
I think when you're young as well, you absorb things so easily, and it takes such a long time to unlearn a lot of things, if you ever really do. Did you know when I was young, I was on a TV show for fat kids?
No way.
And yeah, so I was on national television, a little 10-year-old, and it was horrendous. And there were like doctors on the show giving me like advice on how to not be fat. And a lot of the advice that they gave me was the same stuff that when I was a teenager and I was on like pro-ana websites, so like pro-anorexia websites, it was a lot of the same advice that I was getting on these pro-anorexia websites. Like the stuff that the doctors were telling 10-year-old me, the like anorexia sites were telling 14-year-old me. And it was like crazy stuff. And I am pretty sure at 36 years old, I still have to check myself sometimes and be like, oh, what, are you okay? Was that okay? Why did you do that? Are you doing that because you want to do that or because you think you're supposed to do that? And then I still, even having studied nutrition, even having worked in fitness for 10 years, I still have to like step back sometimes and be like, okay, why do you think that? Is that true? Is that a true thought? And if people are not spending time like on that introspection to like understand why they're feeling things and to unlearn things, you then just teach other people these bad, unhelpful and unhealthy things. And I think when you've got a platform as big as Joe's, you just have to be careful the things that you're teaching people, because it can become quite reckless. You can be trying to do good and end up actually doing harm, and that is tricky and dangerous.
First off, Pennie, I'm sorry to hear that, because no child should have to go through anything like that at all.
It was a ridiculous time.
Yeah. Then again, people are going to look back, 10 years from now and say that, like, the 2025 was a ridiculous time. But I have to be very cautious about what I say about nutrition and about certain foods. And I'm very, I'm cautious with everything that I say and the way I say things. It's like if I'm recommending a specific food, I'm cautious the way, like, yeah, you could have this. It's not like you have to have this. Or, yeah, you should probably limit that. It's like you need to avoid that like the plague. There's different ways of saying things. And I don't think that Joe was like, Joe didn't have bad intentions with this. He just had a bad way of going about something. I also think that Chris Van Tulleken probably had a lot more to do with the direction of the actual documentary, and probably should get more of the blame than Joe. But like, unfortunately, it's in Joe's name. When I was growing up, I was overweight as a child, and I started eating healthier, and I started reading books, anything that I could get my hands on. And I did get into some books that made me afraid of certain ingredients and certain foods, and that stuck with me for a very, very long time. And the thing with orthorexia is that while you have orthorexia, you don't realize you have it. So I'm fully aware that the people who are kind of against, my comments on Joe's documentary, who clearly do have orthorexia, they're not aware of that. All they think is that, we're just eating healthy, and like, it's not their fault, but they are suffering from a form of orthorexia at the moment. Now that I've grown and I'm old now, and I can look back and I can say, right, Jesus, that was a bad time. I can't believe I thought that. But that's because I've got years of nutrition education, under my belt at this point now, and years more experience. And I can look back and say, holy crap, thank God I got out of that. I got away from that way of thinking. But these other people are still trapped in that. And that's what's scary. And I don't want these shows making this orthorexia more common amongst the general population, because we don't need that. Nobody needs that. I don't want anybody to have to deal with that, because like, I've dealt with it, and it sounds like you've had horrible things to deal with as well, and it's not fair.
No, I think people's relationship with food in general, for the most part, a lot of people really struggle, even if it's not to a degree of like a full-on eating disorder. Everyone's relationship is so tricky, and I think part of it is like the way people around us talk about food, and like part of it is that you go in search of information, and it's so hard to know what the true information is, because people are always talking in such extremes. And I think a lot of the time when I'm absorbing information from people now I know better, and now I also follow scientists like you, so it's easier to figure out what the true things are. But I just think about that influencer who only ate fruit and was like, you should only ever eat fruit, fruit is the thing, and then she dies because she was only eating fruit for an amount of time. And when people are talking in extremes, I just think about her. I'm like, it must be so easy to fall further and further into like really extreme thinking, because once you've like gone a little bit, if nobody's checking on you, then you just end up going a little bit further, and then and it becomes really tricky, because I don't know how you convince people to come back.
I don't either, and that's the problem, because and I say this about food all the time. Food becomes very, very much part of people's identity, and if food is part of your identity, you will do anything to protect your identity and, for example, your way of eating. So, like we see this in other communities online, like the carnivore community, for example, online. They've associated their identity with their carnivore diet. So it doesn't matter what scientific evidence you give to these people that this diet is not good for you, or that it has certain risks. They won't listen to it, because listening to it would be accepting that there's a problem with their identity. And the same goes for orthorexia. If you say to people, a small amount of ultra processed foods in your diet is okay, and some of these additives are absolutely okay, they won't hear it, because their identity is, anti ultra processed foods and only whole foods and, only things I can pronounce, which is, a completely ridiculous concept, by the way. So yeah, sometimes you just can't get through to these people, and it has to come from their own experience. And that's why many times these people never get out of that way of thinking, unfortunately.
Can you speak on why only eating things you can pronounce is a ridiculous concept?
I think if you're the kind of person that says, I only eat things that I can pronounce, you really need to start worrying about your reading skills, maybe. So actually, I'm going to give an example from the documentary. So the ingredients list for Joe's protein bar wasn't shown on the documentary itself, but it was on the website online. The ingredients list is super long. And I was like, wow, they've really done a good job of like adding loads of stuff. And then I realized, oh no, they haven't. What they did is they wrote, for many of the ingredients, they wrote the name in plain English, and then they wrote the chemical name. Okay, so I think they had, let me see. I'm trying to think of one of the vitamins that basically they had vitamin E, and then they had its long name after it. And then all of the B vitamins, they had like vitamin B1 or whatever, and then they had the full chemical name after it, right? So if you saw any of these chemical names, you would be looking at them as like, I've never seen that word before. That's a chemical. I don't want that in my body. That's scary. It's a vitamin, for God's sake. Like I could say that, dihydrogen monoxide is killing everybody on Earth. Everybody on Earth who has ever died has consumed dihydrogen monoxide. And people are like, oh crap, dihydrogen monoxide, what the fuck is that? And it's like, it's water. That's a chemical way of describing what water is. And it sounds scary when you give it a really long name like that. But I do this thing with my students, when in my first year students, and I have a chat with them and I say, every single one of you is chemicals. You are all bags of chemicals walking around. Everything you put into your body is a chemical. Okay? Everything. All the good things, all the bad things, they're all chemicals. So being afraid of chemicals is absolutely ridiculous, because we're made of it. But people, when they hear a chemical sounding word that they don't understand, and not everybody's going to understand chemical words. I get it, but it's just ridiculous to be afraid of something that you can't pronounce. Maybe just, like if something is that you don't understand it, look it up and understand what it is. maybe. I'm cautious about saying that because it's also very easy to look up things and like say, oh God, this will kill you. Because you can find a link to death for virtually everything.
I mean, yeah, I guess, especially in the wild, wild west of the internet these days. Where do we draw the line between like what is ultra processed, what is processed, and I guess also what counts as real food?
Okay, that's a good chemical. A good question that they didn't really cover. So, what's the thing that's used nowadays, and it's become the sexy way of describing ultra processed foods, is what's called the NOVA classification system, which was developed in Brazil. And the NOVA classification system has 4 classifications. One of them is whole unprocessed foods. Okay, and whole unprocessed foods would be things like an apple, a piece of fresh meat. Okay, then they've got ingredient foods, and those are things like, for example, salt, sugar, which are completely, refined oils. These are completely extracted foods. Okay, so foods that you take them out of whole foods, and they usually can consist of like one major component. So like it might be salt, it might be just a pure oil, it might be sugar. And then you've got your processed foods, which are kind of made up of basically anything that's got a process done to it. So for example, if you get a porridge, so what would you say porridge is?
I guess once it's been ground, it's a processed food.
It is exactly a processed food. Yeah. So porridge is a processed food. It's actually most like the flat porridge that we see is heated. I think it's steamed and then it is crushed between a couple of plates, and that is a processed food. But if from a health perspective, porridge is pretty phenomenal food. Great source of fiber, great source of energy. It's a really healthy food, but it's a processed food. And then we've got the ultra processed category, which consists of a combination of the category 2, which is the sugars, oils, salts, and whatever, with any of the other foods, and then made using processes that cannot be done in the home. Now, there's a much more complicated explanation for that category of foods, but that's basically what it is. So something that you can't make at home that uses a lot of either sugar or salt or oils, whatever, in the diet, and will have some additives added into it as well. So that's ultra processed.
So if you've got, sorry, no, go on.
No, I was going to say the problem with that is ultra processed food is only a category of processing. It does not mean anything in terms of health. Now, what you can say is that a lot of ultra processed foods, if you eat a lot of them, they're not good for you. So for example, donuts, ultra processed food. If you eat a load of those, not good for you. Nutella, ultra processed food, delicious. If you eat a load of it, probably not good for you. Okay, Skittles, ultra processed food. But then you've got protein powder, ultra processed food, really, really beneficial for helping people improve the quantity of protein in their diet. Certain breads, wholemeal breads, are ultra processed, excellent source of fiber and energy in certain people's diets. So being an ultra processed food does not necessarily mean it is bad for health, but there are a lot of ultra processed foods that do contribute to ill health.
Ultra processed food do you think a person could eat and still be in the healthy end of the scale?
How long's a piece of string? So it depends on the type of ultra processed food that they're eating. So like if you're eating, like if you're talking about how much protein powder can somebody put in it, probably loads, and they'd still be healthy because it's a protein powder. It's not going to do anything. But if you're talking about things like sweets and desserts and like deep fried, like what are they called? Greg's sausage rolls or something like that. You can probably, like, there's a thing called the 80-20 rule, and like it's by no means a rule whatsoever. But with the 80-20 rule, they say like 80% of your diet should be whole foods, and 20% should be whatever. We call them discretionary calories. That's just a rough guide. The majority of your diet should be unprocessed foods or minimally processed foods. So things like, your fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, blah, blah, blah. And then like having some ultra processed foods is no problem at all. Like I will flat out say my diet is not 100% whole foods at all. I will incorporate ultra processed foods into my diet because they make my diet easier to follow. I will have barbecue sauce when I make potato wedges, which are my whole food at home. Okay, because barbecue sauce is delicious, and I cannot eat my potato wedges without it. Like, yeah, it's like that. It's not a simple yes, no, eat this much, that much. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I went for a run the other day and I took marshmallows with me for the first time ever. So every 3 kilometers, I had 2 little marshmallows. And that was probably the best run I've ever had in my whole entire life.
Right.
And
Okay.
I think actually taking snacks to make your life easier is a really solid strategy.
This is it. Like, think about it. Can ultra processed foods make somebody follow a minimally processed diet more easily? And the answer is absolutely yes. Like, if you think I buy a store-bought sauce and I use that to season my vegetables at home, and that allows me to eat more vegetables, fantastic. Or if a child won't drink water no matter what you do, but if you put a little bit of cordial in there, which is an ultra processed food, into that water, and suddenly they're drinking water more regularly, absolutely fantastic. That is a win. And one other thing on that I'm going to say is, somebody mentioned this to me. I'm a dietitian in Cork, and they said to me, you get absolutely no nutrients from the food you don't eat. So if a child is not eating a food, or not eating foods because it's not tasty, or their parents won't give it to them because it has ultra processed ingredients, the child is getting no nutrition whatsoever. And that's a problem, and people need to consider that too.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been super, super interesting. Do you have any final words on either ultra processed foods or any of the other things that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I'll just say, do not put a moral value onto foods or food groups. Okay, ultra processed foods are not the devil, but if your diet is made up of mostly ultra processed foods, yeah, you may need to reconsider that if you can. I will say we eat too much of them in our diet in here in the UK and in most countries in the developed world. It's a problem that needs to be solved, but it's not going to be solved by reading ingredients lists. It's something that needs to be solved on a societal level with government help, basically.
Do you think that it's something that we can change in, I guess, the not too distant future? Like, can we make these big changes? Do you think the government can help? Do you think people can help?
I don't know. I'm naturally positive, but I that's also kind of like, I've got a natural level of pessimism as well. I think the government would need a major motivation to do that, and we're in a very, very bad health situation in the UK, and the government still is not focused on making changes around food, because industry is too profitable. Like, money talks, and like, industry likes to sell. So I don't know, but it does need to be done.
Maybe we'll get to see something happen, I
Fingers
guess.
crossed.
Yeah, I have low expectations too. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you want to tell our lovely listeners where they can find you?
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. You can find me on Instagram. That's the only social media that I'm actually active on, as Dr Richie Kirwan. And yeah, I'm happy to chat with people via that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone enjoys listening to this. If you did enjoy listening to it, give us a 5-star review. If you didn't enjoy it, you don't have to leave a review, but positive reviews are much appreciated. Thanks very much. See you later.
Thanks, Pennie.